Okay, we're looking at the tomb complex of Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi, and I'm going to mess these names up quite a bit. It contains an estimated 8,000 lifelike clay soldiers, as well as mass graves and evidence of brutal power grabs. Now, people are probably familiar with these famous terracotta warriors. What they've realized is that they're somewhat unique, each one in itself, and there are quite a few different heads. Now that they've really discovered them, they found out that someone has taken, maybe about 150 different heads, it seems, and made them out of that, and that they have very much similarities to each other, but then someone came along and made each one unique to itself. And so facial forms and so on, and it probably comes from a lot smaller facial forms than that, but they're done with terracotta. And where we find terracotta really at, and is known for, is over in Greece and of course Italy. So let's look into this. This is from National Geographic, which a couple of years ago kind of changed their ideals on what they might tell people. So let's see what's in here, and if I can't fill in some blanks, if I can. One thing to notice, the heads come off of these, and they've noticed they're kind of plug and play somewhat also. And that's kind of neat, and it shows you kind of like the Greeks had a lot of arms and heads were plug and play on their stuff. And then these horses that are here that really are showing up in China for pretty much the earliest part of their reigns. And it says new discoveries may rewrite history of China's terracotta warriors. Finds at the famous tomb complex point to influences from abroad and a blood-soaked succession after the death of Chinese first emperor. Now, in the 4 decades since mysterious terracotta statues first came to light in northern China, archaeologists have uncovered a whole lifelike army, about 8,000 of these. But that wasn't the only secret hidden under there. Stunning revelations are now rewriting history of the great ruler who created this army as part of his final resting place, and a radical new theory even suggests that foreign artists helped train his craftsmen. Let's look into this. Known today as the first emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi left a legacy that would make him a towering figure in Chinese history. By the time he died in 2010 or 210 BC, he had united warring kingdoms into one country, put an end to feudalism, and built the Great Wall that endures today as a monument to his power. Now, the explorer team visits a tomb. So here we are near Qishan here, and you can see these terracotta warriors. And there's a lot of shows that have them that you can look into, and it'll tell you more and more about them. And their plated armor, which we just recently started talking about, being actually in the Philippines itself. Well, why is this paused? Being in the Philippines itself, and we know about the Proto Indo Europeans and how they had reached up quite a bit, and so it makes you wonder if they didn't have a reach or an influence that reached a little farther than what we're even still willing to agree upon. For if they're in the Philippines and then they're over here, and there's not much area in between, only China itself, and you can see some influence in them. Now, the explorer team visits the tomb of the terracotta warriors and horses, where there is a ceramic army of as many as 8,000 life-size, intricately carved statues modeled after his army. But his most stunning project first came to light in 1974 when farmers uncovered strange figures while digging a well near the old Chinese capital of Huaxiang. Excavations have since revealed sections of a grand funerary complex. 3 huge pits harbor several thousand warriors, presumably meant to protect the emperor for eternity. These statues were unlike anything ever uncovered in China before, and it raises a big question as to why is this resetting? Okay, so let's look at this video here. I had to cut into it, but you can see this terracotta army and how it's lined up here. And this is in the exhibit itself. And they've taken some of these and taken them around the United States and other countries now. And why is it paused again? But his most stunning project first came to light in 1974 when farmers uncovered strange figures while digging a well near the old Chinese capital of Huaichang. Excavations have since revealed sections of a grand funerary complex. Three huge pits harbor several thousand warriors, presumably meant to protect the emperor for eternity. And so this shows very much something like Shabti dolls and things that you can find in a lot of elder tombs. And in fact, in elder tombs of Sumerians and a lot of people, they would ritually actually kill the people that were his servants, and those were supposed to go with him, and they were guaranteed to go to the afterlife because that king was going to go, and so on. Later, it seemed like that was a real bad idea, ruining their governments in some ways, probably in many other ways, and so they started using symbolic things for this army, and this is one of the bigger ones that's ever been found in such an effigy, I guess. These statues are unlike anything ever covered before in China, and it raises a big question: how could the royal artist have come up with such an idea? And so they asked this question. You can see these statues now, they've cracked, a lot of them are cracked into pieces, and so they're taking and fusing them back together as they were once. And experts identify these terracotta figures as acrobats, but some believe the sculpture's lifelike details are evidence of Greek artistic influence. And especially a lot of these that they call the acrobats and so on, and not necessarily the warriors. And they're like, huh. And there's little things that go along with them, and earrings and some other things that are just, And people aren't allowed to talk about this very much, but hey, I'm gonna. Scientists have gathered a variety of provocative clues. Terracotta acrobats and bronze figures of ducks, swans, and cranes uncovered at the Royal Tomb Complex may show evidence of Greek influence. And European DNA has been found and recovered from skeletons at a site in northwestern China. And the Tarim Basin money that they have, and they also have pyramids that have been found there, and quite a few of them have been found there in complexes and so on. One complex contains 15 pyramids among itself, and in fact, a pyramid that is nearly twice the size of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Now, putting these together, experts have worked out a theory. Inspiration for the terracotta army may have come from foreign artists and concepts that we were talking about Shabti dolls and somebody having their entourage in the afterlife. But this also shows you a warring people where he thought in the afterlife he would need an army, wouldn't it? It kind of shows that the mentality of the people at that time, everything was very feudal and back and forth and so on, and he felt he needed that protection and so on, and perhaps even protect his tomb from anybody robbing it, which looks like it's been done so after so many thousands of years. Traveling from Hellenized areas of Western Asia and arriving in China, these foreign artists, 1,500 years before Marco Polo, they could have trained the local craftsmen who furnished the emperor's tomb with statuaries. And I've shown you in an ancient video about silk threads having been found in ancient Egyptian tombs that way predate any Silk Road type thing. And of course, we were talking about Alexander in the end of his campaign here recently, and inside of that I showed you where they had a place they called Alexandria the Farthest. But this also raises questions that maybe, is that the farthest? And is there other connections to go? And what about the Greeks before them and what they had possibly done that we're looking at now, and others that had come before them, and these Proto Indo Europeans that we keep repeatedly talk about that are up in this area right now as it is, in fact predating these burials by over 1,000 years, and they show that they have mummies. Yeah, they have these perfectly preserved mummies. It's more of an arid desert mummy, much like you find up in the Atacama Desert and places in South America. But the original mummies, I guess, in Egypt too, were just sand desiccated mummies, and maybe they got the idea out of that. Or all these people have kind of a conceptive idea of it. And China's megatomb revealed scientists using a remote sensing, ground penetrating radar, and core sampling have also revealed the Emperor's Tomb complex to be much larger than once believed. Almost 38 square miles, some 98 square kilometers. In its heart stands a tall earthen mound that covers the ruler's tomb, which remains sealed. Many other people were also buried at the site. Archaeologists have discovered mass graves that appear to hold the remains of the craftsmen and the laborers, including convicted criminals in chains, who died during the 3 decades it took to create the royal mausoleum. Other mass burials seem to tell grisly tales of a brutal struggle and try to capture of the emperor's throne. Let's expand this out so you can see this fully here. And showing you here that they have the workers' burials up in here, where they'd found tiles bearing name, rank, and even places of origin. They won't let you talk about those or find out what that says on all of them and so on, but there's sacrificial animals, stables and horses, chariots, and so on. And you can see the size of this grand complex here and how it's kind of laid out, and neatly it's laid out exactly on a north-south axis, this road running right through here. Found a bunch of mutilated skeletons here we're about to talk about. Punished convicts we just spoke of are right up in here. The terracotta armies and stuff, but this outer wall and an inner wall that's in here that makes up what looks almost like a U, or almost like the horn type things you actually see on Crete and so on, but and it protects the very center of it. And these walls complex were built of compressing layers of earth, and it's slightly skinnier at the top than it is at the bottom all the way around. But now this whole place was buried. There's a few things though. There's the murdered princes that are down here, and down here again there's another set of stables and horses, a bridge that was made across, and a runway going into it that seemed very much a part of the way it goes, and sacrificial animals all out here in groups. Another oddity here is that the mound in 210 BC was said to have been about 377 foot tall. In cubits and blah blah blah, it comes out to that. But currently it's only 180 foot tall. Not near as pointy as described, quite as much, and so it makes you wonder if it was messed with, unfinished, or maybe it even eroded over time down to that level, or if people tried to take stonework off of it at one time. If there was much more dirt that was on there, people had taken some of that off, because now they've covered all of these with a bunch of dirt and trees. Well, once it came out that we found out they had a bunch of these, and we went over there to try to talk to them, I mean, it's been an incredible adventure. Nixon was able to go to talk to him and stuff, but boy, he couldn't mention anything about it either. So, anyhow, where we're seeing this stuff, and this tells you about the burials, the Emperor's Tomb, punished convicts, and construction stones found at the factory site, iron handcuffs, collars suggest the works were criminals sentenced to labor there in that one part of it. It's kind of like a Chinese Game of Thrones. Despite the brilliance and power of the first emperor, he was able to make sure his eldest son succeeded him. And it was a failure that he had devastating consequences that came from it. Experts now believe that it may have launched a bloodbath and ultimately brought a swift end to the dynasty that Qin Shi Huang had founded. An account written in about 89 BC by Sima Qian, an official in the Second Dynasty, describes a time of deadly palace intrigue. One of the emperor's many sons conspired with the chief eunuch to murder his oldest brother, the emperor's presumed heir, and then seize the throne himself. Now archaeologists have found tantalizing clues that the power grab was even more brutal than Sima Qian described. A group of skeletons was found with the artifacts belonging to the royal family. These were mostly males, possibly the deceased emperor's sons. One skull offers clues to their fate. In it, split by the metal bolt of a crossbow, likely shot at close range. Experts now believe these young princes may have been executed by their ambitious siblings who were trying to secure the throne for themselves in some type of cutthroat battle with your own siblings. And we've seen that happen before, and it's been recorded in Egypt a couple of times there. And one time the royal wife or one of her concubines tried to do it, and so on. So it's nothing unique about that. What is unique here is he talked about being a metal crossbow bolt, and if I'm not wrong, they don't have metal crossbow bolts at this time. Other people do, but they don't, and it doesn't record until shortly after this. And at this time, they're running crossbows, but they're shooting pellets. So it's pretty much like a sling, but a cross sling, if you will, or a crossbow sling, if you will. And it slings rocks and metal pellets. And of course, a metal trajectory can keep a longer, stance without veering off. Now, arrows are shot skinny, but if you take a lightweight arrow and you shoot it skinny, it goes all over the place. It's really not effective at all. If you look at modern crossbow bolts and stuff, or even elder crossbow bolts, they have a heavier head on them and not much of a stem, and with a fluting on the back of it, and it's pretty much shooting that ball anyhow, but it's being dragged by the back, so aiming, and in that aim also we can make a point on the front of it and pow, make a penetration. But crossbows definitely date in China before this date, but I believe that we're looking at a change too, and there's quite a few changes that come to this land that lead to a person trying to get control of the whole area and pull it together as one. Kind of like Upper and Lower Egypt, kind of like a lot of places did over time. And I think we're seeing a connection here. The metal bolt from the crossbow remains lodged in the skull, and he's pointing at it right in there. And it may have been a prince who was murdered in a bloody struggle for his father's throne. It's just somewhat conjecture, but it could be. Pardon me. In another area, very close to the emperor's burial, archaeologists have found an unidentified group of about 100 tombs. After excavating several, they're still unsure of what they found. The burial chambers are empty, and body parts lie strewn all around in the doorways, along with a scattering of pearls and pieces of gold still left there. So, just odd. Were these the royal concubines in some way, buried near the deceased emperor to serve him in the next world as they had in his life, or do these graves represent something sinister? According to the account left by Sima Qian, the new emperor, the usurper, killed many of his father's concubines. Sad as it may seem, that move would have made sense to someone whose claim to the throne was shaky. The usurper had already killed the heir apparent, and also likely did away with his brothers, who were potential rivals. But what if some of these concubines were pregnant? And what if one were to give a birth to a boy who was then hidden, brought up secret, like Zeus, trained to be a great warrior, and finally presented a fully grown man able to overthrow his much older brother and take his father's title and territories for himself? Hint, hint, hint. In thinking through this worst case scenario, there would have been no choice. The women had to die, but why their bodies were dismembered is unclear. Perhaps clues will turn up in the many burials that are still to be excavated. And there's an idea, somebody's already gone against this and said, well, what if somebody went in and tried to rob it and do all that? And he goes, it's a sign of robbing, go anywhere into it? And they're like, well, no. But so it's just strange. Here you can see one of the skulls is cracked, and how the bones, and it's piled up, it's just not right. The skull and leg bones of a young female are likely remains of a concubine found in the emperor's burial. In the end, though, all the bloodshed was for naught, because the usurper, Qin el-Shi, couldn't begin to fill his father's shoes. His rule lasted a mere 3 years, and his family dynasty was soon overthrown. The first emperor's tomb was surely holds many more surprises, but archaeologists have no plans to excavate it in the near future. Exposing fragile artifacts to air and light might damage them beyond repair, it's feared, and so the tomb will be likely stay buried until radically new conservation and technologies are discovered in the future. And in other words, they're going to put it off to the point that it's rotted away to where you really can't tell anything, and then they'll try to save it as the last effigy type thing. And that's why a lot of people, they say, oh, don't mess with it. And then other people go, you have to grab it and preserve it now, or there's not going to be much. And there's a large fight between those two. Even in Egypt now, we almost seem to see a panic to try to, we have a lot of people wanting to do research, but very few are given the actual license to do so. Sima Qian wrote that the emperor was laid to rest in a bronze coffin, and his burial chamber was filled with lavish grave goods, replicas of palaces, rivers of mercury, rare utensils, and wonderful objects. But Sima Qian was writing more than a century after the first emperor's death. Could he really have gotten all these details right? Could he be trying to actually blow it up to much more than it was? Well, there are a lot of people that believe that, yeah, there's a whole effigy down there of the land and all the rivers running through the land and so on, and that they had plastered, made it all up, made little cities and stuff, almost like a diorama you would for a train set, and where the rivers were filled up with pools of mercury that they had. And they were using mercury at this time and so on. People then were also eating pellets of it and so on. And it could be the reason some of these emperors died. They were trying to ingest rare metals and all kinds of crazy things of the gods, So some of his statements seem to be too over the top to be true, as I just spoke about, but that the emperor pressed 700,000 laborers and convicts into service to build his grand funerary landscape, for example. And that's a huge number. And Sima Qian seems to have skipped over some important features altogether, offering not one word about the creation of this terracotta army, which also kind of leaves it somewhat conspicuous. But in light of the evidence for the royal murders before the unlikely succession of a junior prince, it seems entirely possible that his description of the royal burial chamber is accurate, and that archaeologists will someday uncover Qin Shi Huangdi's fabled treasure trove and the rivers of mercury. Let me show you a video that'll show you a little bit more about these pyramids. And where these are found is right out in this area here in China. And look at the groups of these. I know this is an overhead viewing, but China says, no, you can't go view these things. Let's take a look at what we do know about this, because this is Soviet-controlled China. Look at these giant pyramids. You can see groups of them off in the distance here in this shot. 1, 2, 3. I still see some in the distance. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And a huge one, 9. I believe in a moment we're fixing to see this one right here, and you can see the size of it. It itself, footprint-wise, is twice the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza. You can look at this in these complexes here, and where there would have been the ruts, and you can see the squared outness of this, and how this would have been a complex, much like we were looking at in the terracotta armies and so on. But huge complexes. Then there's engravings that are found that really don't look quite that Roman. And then there's this guy. What's this? It's kind of strange, these effigies they found there. And wow, look at these pyramids. And if you just didn't have land and growing around it, and they're all through here, 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 here. And look at these giant pyramids. Now what they've started doing is planting trees over them once they found out that we know about these. Look at the size of this pyramid here. Just dwarfing, and looking, you can tell this is a strict pyramid, very much like the ones in Giza. The one in Giza's, though, are 392 feet tall, And this one right over here reaches to be almost that tall, but nearly twice the size of that. You can see the groups of them here, here, here. Here's the one we were talking about that has a footprint twice the size of the Pyramid of Giza. And here's the guy that's having to farm in front of it and so on. But you can tell they've terraced up onto this thing, and they're growing stuff onto here and trying to make these all just go away, I guess you'd say. You can see the giant megalithic blocks that are made into it from there. And from this main complex, you can see all of these different ones that have been found around it. Let me tell you a little story here about a Buddha. There was a man who was supposedly from Europe, but in Russia, and had been there for a long time, able to go with an archaeological team over to China, back whenever no one was allowed to go over there. And he came to ask about these pyramids and these people and a few artifacts that he had, and they were shown to this one Buddha. The one Buddha came and said, let me show you this one room here, maybe it will answer your questions. He walked him over into the room, left him into the room, and said he's fixing to go get him some tea, look around, it might answer your questions, something to this effect. He left. Well, all around this wall here, there's all Chinese paintings like you see right here, but everybody in the paintings all has blue eyes. And when the man came back and the Buddha walked up to him, supposedly the Buddha, whenever he looked up, had blue eyes. And it's stated in his statement, kind of, there were really no questions that he had from that point on. So, and that could just be some BS telling, but look at these complexes that are around that are step pyramids that look very much like they do in South America. You can see them dotted all over the landscape here. Some of these were photographed by American pilots that had gone over. It's the first time we really found out about them. I mean, people were stationed up in Upper India and rode across this place, and then lo and behold, they took pictures of these. They went across, they're like, well, look at this, there's a pyramid, and it's huge, and marked out here, there's 8 in that photograph. Here's one of those photographs from that plane out the window. And you can see this thing here. This is the one that's twice the size of the footprint of the Great Pyramid. And if you look, there's a whole civilization around it, and these lines that are cut into the ground and the way it works. And there's a whole complex up under here, which is now kind of farmland. It's just kind of being farmed over again. Here's the dude farming, and he's farming right over a terracotta army or something, and you can see this is lined up, delineated, blockaded around it. Here's another complex, and it's almost the same size. Here's the coordinates on Google Earth. You can go and find these even to this day, although they're harder to see with all this plant material growing over the top of them and so on. Look at this, they plant trees on them and kind of make it that way. Even though whenever you go there, if you saw that, they have walking trails to go look at them, but they're kind of hiding them. But then the people have this reverence for them. Look at this complex and how many pyramids there are. And I could tell you that was Giza looking down at it, but you could see the farmland around it and not. No, that's not Giza. Where is that? Oh, that's up here in the edge of China, on the edge of where the Proto Indo Europeans went. Yeah, and all those burials I've been showing you and stuff, and we've been talking a lot about it in the Sakasune and the Isaac and Kurgan burials and the people that had come up here, and apparently also touched heavily upon India and helped them out quite a bit also. Right? And the double-headed eagle design that seems to ride in a few places, and swastikas and things that seem to follow these people and cultures around, and all these trees planted in a row, making a grove out of this thing, not scattered haphazard, but in rows. But there's still a trail leading up to it. Huge, huge Chinese pyramids. They look very much like South American pyramids and mastabas and all kinds of Egyptian pyramids too. But now they're kind of being hidden and farmed over, I guess, if you will. Anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. But once we get a little together, I mean, the last Olympics helped us out to get a little more together with these people. I don't know. Trump's over there right now talking to them. Let's see how that goes, and we can find out more about their origins. But I think just like India, they're not going to be willing to want to talk about that in any way, and so we're probably stuck at this point. But before this disappears up under mounds of trees and vegetation, I wanted to give y'all a look at it. And again, Nat Geo pumped this out, and believe me, a couple of years ago they might have gone a little farther with what they were trying to say. So I went a little bit farther, but I didn't go all the way, did I? Like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.